Sometimes, in a relationship, we get bored with the activities we do in the same place, with the same people. Everything is the same. That's why Emily and Daniel decided to do it in nature once in a while. When I heard this story, I couldn't blame it. I could only write it down and tell you this. The real story will be very wild, but I will try to make it more polite. The dense forest loomed ahead, its towering trees casting long shadows under the dying afternoon sun. A narrow dirt road led deeper into the woods, where an unsettling silence hung in the air. The only sound came from the crunching footsteps of Daniel and Emily, a couple eager for adventure. Their backpacks were heavy with supplies, but the excitement made the load feel lighter. "This is going to be amazing," Daniel grinned, squeezing Emily's hand. She smiled back, though something about the place made her uneasy. The trees swayed without wind, and the air smelled strangely stagnant, as if time itself stood still in this forgotten corner of nature. As they walked further down the path, a figure emerged from the trees, a frail old woman draped in a tattered shawl, her cloudy eyes peering at them with quiet intensity. She stood motionless beside the trail, as if she had been expecting them. Emily and Daniel slowed their pace, exchanging glances before Daniel cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you know the way to the lake?" he asked. The woman's lips twitched, forming a faint, knowing smile. "I do," she rasped. "But you must listen carefully. Go there only with pure intentions. Anything else will invite something unwelcome." Daniel let out a short laugh, brushing off the old woman's cryptic warning. "We'll be fine," he assured, but Emily couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. The woman's gaze lingered on them for a moment longer before she slowly raised a trembling hand, pointing down a barely visible path leading deeper into the forest. "If you go at your own risk," she murmured, then turned away, vanishing into the thick shadows of the trees. Emily hesitated, but Daniel tugged her forward, eager to reach the lake before nightfall. "She's just trying to scare us," he said. Emily nodded, forcing a smile, but the woman's words echoed in her mind. The forest grew denser as they followed the winding path, the air growing colder with each step. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the silence became. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, only the sound of their own breathing and the occasional rustling of leaves beneath their boots. Emily found herself glancing over her shoulder, feeling as though unseen eyes were watching them from between the trees. Daniel, however, remained unfazed, his grip firm on her hand. "Almost there," he muttered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Then, without warning, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, like a branch snapping underfoot. Both of them froze. Emily's fingers tightened around Daniel's arm as they scanned the trees, but there was nothing, just the same endless expanse of twisted branches and unmoving shadows. "Probably just an animal," Daniel whispered, though his voice wavered. Emily wanted to believe him, but the forest felt wrong, like something unnatural lurked just beyond their vision, waiting. They pressed on, moving faster, eager to reach the lake and shake off the growing unease clawing at their chests. The trees thinned as they finally reached the lake, its dark waters stretching wide beneath the twilight sky. A dense mist hovered just above the surface, swirling lazily as if alive. The air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic. Emily shivered, hugging herself. "It's beautiful," Daniel said, dropping his backpack, but his voice held no real excitement, only a forced enthusiasm as if trying to convince himself. Emily hesitated before setting her bag down. The woman's warning echoed in her mind, a lingering whisper in the back of her thoughts. They worked quickly to set up their tent, the dwindling light casting long shadows over the uneven ground. As Emily unrolled the sleeping bag, she caught movement from the corner of her eye, a figure standing at the water's edge. Her breath hitched as she turned sharply, but there was nothing there. Just the lake, still and unmoving. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked up from the firewood he was gathering. "See what?" she swallowed, forcing a small laugh. "Nothing. I guess I'm just on edge." But deep down, she knew she had seen something, and whatever it was, it had been watching them. The campfire crackled weakly, its light barely pushing back the creeping darkness. The mist over the lake seemed thicker now, curling toward the shore like grasping fingers. Daniel sat beside Emily, absently poking at the fire with a stick. "You're really letting that old woman's story get to you, huh?" he teased, nudging her shoulder. Emily forced a smile, but her gaze remained fixed on the water. "I don't know, Daniel. This place feels wrong." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and as she spoke, the wind shifted, carrying with it a distant, echoing sound. It wasn't the rustling of trees or the call of an animal. It was something else, low, drawn out, almost like a moan. Daniel tensed, his playful demeanor fading. "Did you hear that?" he muttered. Emily nodded slowly, her fingers digging into the fabric of her jeans. The sound came again, closer this time, a shuffling movement from the tree line. They both turned, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the firelight. At first there was nothing, but then, just barely visible between the trees, a tall, gaunt figure stood motionless, its face obscured by shadows. A sickening wave of dread washed over Emily as the figure took a slow, deliberate step forward. Daniel grabbed Emily's wrist, yanking her toward the tent. "Screw this, we're leaving now," he hissed. But as they turned, the fire behind them flared unnaturally high, casting a sudden burst of light across the campsite. For a split second, Emily saw it clearly. Its face was hollow, stretched into something that mimicked human features, but was all wrong. Its mouth gaped open in a silent scream, its eyes black pits that seemed to swallow the fire's glow. Then the light died down, and the figure was gone. Panting, Daniel fumbled for the flashlight in his pack, his hands shaking. Emily clutched his arm, her pulse pounding in her ears. "It's playing with us," she whispered. The woods felt tighter, the trees pressing in, the lake behind them eerily still. Then came the sound. A slow, deliberate scraping, like nails dragging across wood. It wasn't coming from the forest, it was coming from the tent. The fabric shifted slightly, as if something inside was pressing against it from within. Daniel's breath came in short, panicked bursts as he aimed the flashlight at the tent. The beam trembled, casting erratic shadows over the fabric. Emily clutched his arm, her entire body rigid with fear. The scraping sound came again, slow and deliberate, as if whatever was inside was waiting, taunting. Then, without warning, the tent collapsed inward, as though an unseen force had crushed it from above. The poles snapped with a sickening crack. Emily let out a strangled gasp, stumbling back. "We have to run," she choked out, her voice barely more than a whisper. Daniel didn't argue. He grabbed Emily's hand, and together they bolted toward the tree line, their boots pounding against the damp earth. The woods, once eerily silent, now seemed alive with noise, branches rustling, leaves crunching, distant whispers that weren't carried by the wind. Emily didn't dare look back, but she could feel it, something chasing them, something closing in. The path ahead twisted in the darkness, barely visible under the weak glow of Daniel's flashlight. "Faster," he gasped. But no matter how fast they ran, the presence behind them never faltered, never slowed. It was toying with them. The trees seemed endless, their gnarled branches stretching like skeletal hands overhead. Emily's legs burned, her breath ragged, but she didn't dare stop. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a chorus of unseen voices, each one muttering words she couldn't understand. Then, a sharp snap from behind. Daniel yelped as he stumbled, nearly dragging Emily down with him. She turned, her heart lurching. The thing was there, just beyond the light, its shape shifting between the trees. It didn't run, it didn't need to. It only watched, its hollow face barely visible in the gloom. Emily yanked Daniel up, forcing him forward. "Come on, we're almost there," she cried. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing down on them as if the forest itself wanted to keep them trapped. But then through the tangled branches, a break in the darkness, a sliver of open land. The village. Relief surged through her, but the whispers didn't fade. They grew more frantic, as if the thing knew its prey was slipping away. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, and for the first time, Emily swore she heard it speak, one final, distorted murmur before they crossed the threshold into safety. As soon as their feet hit the dirt road leading into the village, the air shifted. The suffocating weight lifted, the whispers cut off like a severed thread, and the night fell into an unnatural silence. Emily and Daniel collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. their bodies trembling. They turned back toward the forest, expecting to see it, the thing that had chased them. But there was nothing. Just the towering trees and the distant shimmer of the lake, still and undisturbed, as if nothing had ever happened. A soft voice broke the silence. "You ignored the warning, didn't you?" They spun around to see the old woman standing in the doorway of a nearby house, her face unreadable. Emily swallowed hard, unable to answer. The woman sighed, shaking her head. "You're lucky to be alive," she muttered before stepping back inside, leaving them alone with the cold night and the lingering knowledge that something was still watching from the darkness beyond the trees.